Welcome to the District School Board of Niagara's Curriculum Support Services webinar series. In this episode, we're going to learn how to use a Makey.
The first thing you're probably asking yourself is, what's a Makey? Well, the answer is really simple. It's just this. It's a microcontroller. Now, I know when we get to coding, we hear the words like microcontroller and see wires and buttons. We might get a little nervous about we might not be an expert. But what does this really do? Let me show you.
It simply does this. It takes control of your keyboard. So this microcontroller simply turns itself into a simple key push. If that's all it does, then why are we using this? Well, because it takes that key push from this, or even this, to this. This is called physical coding. You finally get to take all that coding and programs on your computer and put it into a tangible object that you can use to control, present, and show what you created. This Makey webinar will focus on 7 key learnings. First, you'll learn about the Makey and how to set it up. Your first lesson with students will be, is it conductive, where we only use 2 wires and plug and play apps so there's no coding involved. Lesson 2 will be learning about using all the buttons and inputs on the front of the Makey without any coding as well. Lesson 3 will be integrating the jumper wires on the back, so we'll be using all the possible inputs they can use with the jumper cables and the alligator clips. Lesson 4 will look at designing switches and sensors you can use to activate the Makey. And Lesson 5 will introduce some basic scratch coding concepts using the Makey extension. And finally, I'm going to show you some projects, but also some resources where you can go for more ideas and some help. When you first open up your Makey kit, you should have 4 main parts. The Makey itself, a red or white USB cord that will power your Makey to the computer, alligator clips, and jumper cables. Let's take a look at the board first. Remember, the board is just a key click. If you look at it closely, you can see there's an up, down, left, right, space, click, and all the buttons along the bottom are the earth. It kind of looks like an old school Nintendo controller. The front part of the Makey is what you'll be using when you first introduce it to your students. When you get more advanced, if you flip the Makey over, you're going to notice they have these jumper areas. These areas basically allow you to have more key inputs. So along the side, you still have your up, down, left, right, space. But on this side, you now have W, A, S, D, F, G. If you ask any of your Minecrafters or Roblox people, this is what a lot of people use to game with on the internet. Along the bottom, you still have all the holes for your earth. And along the top, there's a couple added key switches where you can add LED lights or even a motor, but for the motor, you can't really control it. It's either an on-off situation. On the back of the top here, you can see this is where the power cord goes. So let's start by inserting the power cord, and we're going to hook up 2 of the main buttons for the Makey. Let's start hooking up the Makey to your computer. The first you'll need is your USB cord, and we want the smaller end first. We're going to plug that in to the Makey, and you can see right by the up signal, it fits right in there. Plug it in, and you can see it'll just hook in like that. Now, then you're going to take your USB cord, and you're going to plug it directly into your computer. I have an extender here so you can see what happens when I plug it in. Take a look when I plug this into power. You can hear the computer, and you can see all the lights light up. Let's take a look at that again, because this is what I usually tell students is happening, and that's how they know there's power going to the Makey. You can see it lights up everywhere, and if you turn it over, you'll now see this red light showing that you have power. So now we have it hooked up. Since we know it works and has power, let's unplug this, because when we start plugging cords in, it's going to actually take control of our computer. Next, we're going to introduce 2 of the alligator clips. So the alligator clips just work by pinching kind of like a clothespin. Sometimes plastic can slip up and down, and that's okay, as long as we can get it opening and closing. So we're only going to hook up 2 wires to start with. The first one is going to go on the bottom. We need one for the earth wire. So let's connect that there, and notice I'm not forcing it all the way through. I don't have to jam it in because then it just makes it harder to take out. The next one we're going to take and we're going to put into the space button. So I now have 2 connectors, one in space, one in earth. And this is what's going to form my circuit. So even though we're learning about electricity, we talk to the students, no matter what age they are, that electricity works in a circle. So one, the ground button or the earth wire, always has to be touched for the other buttons to work. Let's plug in our power now. And notice when I do touch these two, you can see the space lighting up. So let's look at a better angle here. We're going to look at that little light there. When we touch it, you can see that that connection is happening, and that means I'm pressing the space bar. For introduction, we're simply going to use these two wires to use on the Makey app website so students can learn how the Makey operates. Let's go to the website now. Let's go to the Makey website where there's lots of different apps we can use. Simply just go in and type in Makey, and you can see the makey.com there. If you want to go directly to the apps we're about to use, you can go to the plug and play Makey apps found here. These apps are pre-made apps on Makey where you don't have to worry about coding, but you're just going to go try to use the Makey. So the one I always start with students is I go to, is it conductive? We're just going to go click play. And here for the Makey, all you're going to do is you're going to see that the trigger is space. That means when we push the space key on the Makey, it will activate. So if I just push the space bar on my keyboard, it's saying, yes, it is conductive, but really what it's doing in the background is it's saying when I push the space bar, activate whatever's programmed. So this is a great way that students can enter this when they want to test out the Makey and learn how it works. Let's see what it looks like in action. Now that I'm ready to go, I have my power on, I have the space alligator clip, and I have an earth alligator clip. When I take these two, notice nothing's happening right now because I'm touching the rubber. But when I touch them together, it is conductive. So the fun test I like to do now is I like to get students to grab the metal part of this and then get a couple more students to grab the metal part of this, and then when they connect, they find out that they are conductive. And notice because I'm holding them that the conductive switch isn't changing. The minute I let go of one, it opens up again. So this closes the circuit because it forms that circle for electricity. The best thing I like to do as a teacher is I hold on to one, and then when I hook them all up, I give each student one, and then we do high fives and we activate other programs. So the biggest thing that I do now here is I stop, and then I ask the students, let's find out what is conductive. And then they start going around and they're trying to find different things that might be conductive. So I might get a nail, and I'll clip one side here and then touch the other side. Yep, a nail's conductive. Maybe I'll grab a popsicle stick, and we'll grab that one side and grab the other side, and nope, not conductive. Notice I truthfully don't even have to open up the clips, but I like to because it's good practice of them opening and closing all the clips. So you're just going to go through and find lots of different strange things in your classroom. Bring things from your home, have them bring stuff in. So Trident, yep, it's conductive, but let's really test this model out. Is it the foil or is it the gum? Ah, not conductive. So this is where you get to choose how things work. You'll be surprised what is conductive and what's not conductive. For example, if I take Play-Doh, and here's a great tip, you don't even have to open up the clips for this, just jam the clips right in there. And now when I hold one, remember this one's the space key, this one's the earth key. When I touch them, have that conversation. Why is it conductive? Here's a hint, it's the salt content. That's why we're conductive too. So there's a lot of different things you can do and experiment with to see how conductivity works. So this screwdriver, this part, yep, it's metal, it's conductive, but when I touch this part, it's not conductive because this is plastic. So you can talk about how there are things called insulators that actually prevent things from working. You'd be amazed what's conductive. Even drawing in pencil can be conductive. So as long as it's touching the graphite of the pencil, you can hook up alligator clips and pretty much make whatever you want. So that's your first basic lesson. Is it conductive? How does that work? Just by using two alligator clips, the space and the earth, and having students understand that you always have to be touching the earth for anything else to work on the Makey. So yes, we're learning if things are conductive, but they're also learning how a Makey works. Next phase, we're going to learn how to hook up the rest of the Makey Makey, which is going to include the back of the Makey Makey using the jumper wires to include more buttons in your builds. Now that you've done the intro of how to hook up a Makey Makey and done the conductivity test with only the space and earth, let's go ahead and hook up the other buttons in the up, down, left, right. So here you can see I have all my alligator clips hooked into the right spots. To show this example, I'm going to simply use Play-Doh to hook my Makey Makeys into. Usually when I do this with students for the first time, the first thing I do is I just use something simple. So for this one, I'm just going to use Play-Doh, and I'm going to mimic exactly what the Makey Makey looks like. The only difference is I'm going to throw in a different color of Play-Doh to represent the earth wire. So then I'd simply have the students hook this up. And remember, you can do this with Play-Doh, or you can even use paper fasteners. The key to this is looking at your wires and remembering which one is which. So white goes to the bottom, so I have to make sure that's in the bottom. This is why they have colored wires to make it a little bit easier. But it's also just mapping out which wire goes where when you're hooking things up. This only looks a little bit messy because of the tutorial and how we're so close together here. So I have all my wires set up. So basically I've just recreated what the Makey Makey looks like right here with all the wires. So now I'm going to go open up one of the Makey Makey app extensions so the students can just see how we can use more buttons for the Makey Makey. Let's go back to our Makey Makey plug and play apps. There's a lot you can choose from. The audio sampler is very cool, but let's go to the piano app, and this is what you might want to do with your students as well. So here we have the app. Let's just minimize that so now we can see our camera in action. And here you go. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to plug in my Makey Makey. Now notice I do this after I'm at the website I want, because don't forget, this controls your keyboard. That's all it does. So it would be going up and down and be really hard to negotiate where I'm actually clicking on. Now that we're powered up and ready to play, let's start playing. You can see we have our buttons. Uh-oh, something's not right. Well, this is a great conversation with your students because this is probably what they're going to do to start with. Remember, we have to connect the electricity. We have to create that signal, which is closing a circuit and the circle, which means we forgot about earth. We always have to be touching earth for other things to work. So if I hold down the earth button, all of a sudden my piano works. And the minute I let go, it doesn't work anymore. So always remind your students, no matter what happens, earth is your power button. Without earth, there is no power and you won't be able to close that circle. Now we're going to add more buttons by using the back of the Makey Makey and the jumper wires. So let's first remove all these wires and flip the Makey Makey over to the back side. So here you can see we're going to be able to add more things by using these black areas over here, which have little jumper wires that go into them. So let's focus on the WASD-GF. I'm going to take one of the jumper wires that's provided by Makey Makey in the box. I'm going to take it and I am just going to place it and push it right into the Makey Makey hole that is that. So there you can see I have a jumper wire and it is under the W right there. So that means when I click W, this button will activate depending on what I have on my program or my code. So let's add the rest of those ones directly onto the Makey Makey. Once I have all these hooked up, you have options, but pretty much we never usually just use the end of this wire here. What we're going to do is we're going to grab some of our alligator clips and we're simply going to attach them to the end of that wire. So now this red wire is connected to the G button. So whenever I plug this into something, this will be the G button. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to hook all of these jumper wires up, but that doesn't mean you can't use the up, down, left, right, and mouse button. You have the option of either A, using this side, but honestly, to make it really easy, I just use my alligator clips because they're so sturdy, and I click on the back side. I'm just going to take the wires that I had before, and I'm just going to click them into the back side, and you can see we still have the same buttons. The only thing you have to remember is that it's easy to see up and down, but don't forget left and right. If you flip it over, technically that white one is the left and this green one is the right. So this again, follow your colors, but make sure you reverse them because now we're looking at the back of the board. So now you can see we have a lot more buttons that we can use to connect up to a Makey Makey. Now at this point, there's a lot of organized chaos going here. There's lots of different jumper wires going to colored wires, and then the other wires here. The biggest thing is organization, which is honestly a really good skill for the students to have, where they can follow which wire and map out where it's going to. This is exactly how machines look, arcade games look, so there's a lot that goes on here. But I want to show you a technique that I use to make things a little bit easier. Just like in literacy, I'll use a planner. So this is a great way to map out everything you're going to use because it has all the inputs and the students can write exactly what's going to happen and even the color of wires they'll have when they attach those to the Makey Makey, and then they'll know what the input and the output is going to be. The biggest thing with the jumper wires is fastening to something that's understandable. So when I first start off, sometimes I'll just write the actual letters on a piece of cardboard and attach them that way. Brads or paper fasteners are pretty much my most favorite use of a button for a Makey Makey, because all I do is I take whichever one I'm looking for. So this one is the W for my jumper because I can track it right from there, and that's the yellow one. All I do is take it, turn it over, and I just clip it on just like that. Look how easy that is. These won't always be together. They can be spread out no matter what you make, but this is a really easy way to create a button or even a controller. You might have the up, down, left, right space button here. I'm going to show you everything hooked up. So you're just going to follow that mapping from the jumper to which wire and attach it to whatever it is. Again, you can use Play-Doh, paper fasteners, whatever you want. For this demonstration, I'm dividing them up so you can see both of them. I've gone ahead and hooked up all the wires back here. Now here's why I love using paper fasteners. Number one, you notice I kind of have the pattern because we don't want any of these buttons touching each other. But with brads and fasteners, you can just bend them over, you can open them up, you can find all these different ways to keep them connected. So I'm just going to fold all these over so they stay in. Sometimes you may have to rehook. That happens. But now those are all on. I can turn it over, and there's my controller. So I'm going to move all this out of the way, and I'm going to show you the next phase that you can do with the Makey Makey apps. Let's go back to our Makey Makey plug-and-play apps, and this is where we actually do want the audio sampler because it's going to include all the other buttons we included. Let's minimize that. There's our camera, so this is what it looks like for our Makey Makey buttons. We're going to make sure the earth here is visible, and then all we do, we hold down that earth.
Check it out, y'all.
And then we can use our other keys as well. So now because we're incorporating all these other ones, now you can have a little mixer booth, but look at all the buttons. We have every single button plugged in. So the students are going to have a great time learning this, and this leads to one of the greatest projects for Makey Makey, and how I learned Makey Makey is creating musical instruments that can be original. So now that we have everything hooked up, you've seen how all the other buttons work, how we can use the back of the Makey Makey to plug in the cables. We're going to learn about some of the interesting switches and sensors you can design just using stuff you find around the school and your house to build new projects. This section of the tutorial is going to focus on types of switches. There's tons of different types of switches you can use, and I'll show you a couple of the easy ones to make just out of the stuff you have in your recycling bin. The first one we're going to talk about are simply hinge switches. These are simple to make because you make them out of paper or out of cardboard, and there's two different types. One, you just have tin foil on either side, and then you can just hook up the Makey Makey either which way as long as the alligator clips are touching those, and then you simply touch them together and it makes the sound. The other version is simply going to be the same, except now you're going to put both alligator clips on the bottom because you have a strip of tin foil going along the top, and when it folds over, it'll connect these two just like a circuit. And you can see my camera going off too because I'm controlling my camera. Two other switches that are pretty awesome are called the pressure switch, but you'll also hear them called push switches or stomp switches. This one I'm going to show you is basically a simple device where you have one piece of tinfoil underneath and you take a piece of paper and you arch it over the top of the other one. What will happen is when you push down on this one, it activates a switch. That's why it's called a push switch. But the reason why it can be a pressure switch is because you can place this in a game and when something drops on it, it'll activate that switch. So all you do is, again, notice I'm just hooking up the wires. You can hook them up anywhere because this is going to be completely covered in tin foil. And when something drops on it, there it is. You can see that activates it. Again, it's just something conductive touching something conductive. The other one that works similar to that is what I like to call the stomp switch. Looks pretty basic, but it's being held by two pieces of elastic. Let me show you what's on the inside. On the inside, there are two pieces of tin foil, and I just use felt here as a barrier because what that will do is it creates that little gap. So because of that gap, you can see nothing is being touched. So if I put elastics on this, sometimes I'll even glue the edges together, but for this, I want you to be able to see the inside. We're just going to hook up the two clips. Whenever I do a stomp switch, usually I do them from other sides. This one's a little bit more fun than the pressure switch because with this one, you can actually stomp it. So these are great for foot pads, pedals, anything like that. I even use these where the students will come into my class and let me know how they're doing. I might have a happy emoji there or a sad emoji, and they come up and it's like a high five. They hit it and it records it on Scratch or my program, whatever it is they made. I'm so glad you're happy to be at school today. I can't wait to see what you do. You're looking fantastic today. I bet you got big plans. So those are the pressure switches and the stomp switches. The next switch is simply called a slap switch. Here you can see I use copper tape. Copper tape is great for circuits and makey. You can use whatever you want though, don't forget. The concept of this is when I touch the two together, they're going to use me as a conductive material because these are already connected and hooked up. So right now nothing's working, but the minute I connect the two together, you can see it takes that picture again. So these are really great for some quick acting things, reflexes, timing, keeping count, other options like that. The next one still uses the most favorite thing that I use are the brads and the paper fasteners. So again, you just stick the brads through whatever you want, and then you just take your clips and you attach them to the brads. Notice on these ones, I've actually bent them over just so it kind of holds them in a little bit better. You can even put tape on them once they're applied there. But the bonus part about this is we're going to turn this brad into something different called a knife blade or a switchblade switch. All that does is, rather than having to touch these, we turn the switch on and off. So if I take the paper clip and move it down, it makes contact, so that means it's going to connect. And there you can see it taking a picture there. This leads to other knife switches that we have. So this is a reminder of like the old school 1970s one. This is exactly what we're making with the blade switch, where we would have two of the wires connected here, and then you would turn it down and activate the switch. So another one that we can use is actually just making our own type of blade switch. So here you can see I've just made kind of two pieces of a cardboard with a switch that goes down like that. And same thing, I'm just going to take my two wires, attach them to either poles, and then when I move the switch down, it activates the switch. Now, do you see what happened there? Because that switch stayed on, it took several pictures. So that's another thing we can use for coding later, is that if you want something on all the time, you can activate it when it's on and when it's off. If you look in your science cabinets, you might actually find old levers or switches in there as well. These are just arcade buttons, but the way they work is they have two legs, a positive and a negative. And so what I've done is I've hooked them up there. The Makey works just by turning things on and off. Another favorite of students will just be the simple magic wand. So you can pretty much cover anything in aluminum foil like a wand, and you can put one wire to the bottom. I usually use this as my earth wire, and then as I touch other things, Wingardium Leviosa, It makes contact and connects. So if you had all these other buttons on the Makey connect to something on a project, you can just have people use the magic wand to come up and activate whatever it is they're using. Everything up to this point with the Makey has been using the Makey plug and play apps where there's no coding involved. But now we're going to incorporate some scratch coding where the students can actually create code and see them live off the screen. Again, no coding experience is necessary because when you see the Makey apps within the Scratch environment, you're going to realize how simple it is. To first get to Scratch, simply type in the word Scratch into Google, and it's usually the first one where it says Scratch, Imagine, Program, Play. Let's go in there, and what I do recommend you do with your students is you go in and you bookmark this page. When you bookmark it, you can throw it right in the bookmarks bar, and then it'll always be there, so you don't have to keep Googling it to get there. Once you get here, you can create a class account for your students by logging in as an educator. Please see our website for further details on that. I'm just going to go now into Create. And this is the Scratch environment. Now, depending on what you're making, sometimes what's on this screen doesn't even matter because you might be focused on music or a student's voice. But the one thing we do want to get is we want to go down here to the extra block extension on the lower left. Once you click on that, you can see there it is, the Makey extension, make anything into a key. This is how easy the coding actually gets now when you see it. There's only 2 buttons. What the Makey does, as we learned before, is that it is simply a button push. So this Scratch code actually just has when the space key is pressed, and surprise, there's all our other inputs on the Makey. So we have the front and we have the back with the jumper cables. From here, you kind of get into what you want to create. So if you're using this for a musical project or using it for a project to show students' voice, there's a couple of things we can do. Number one, there are, of course, the sounds. So when you go click on the sounds, you can simply go in and you can find your own sounds. So here, if you go into the musical notes or percussion, you can actually program and make a musical instrument. Let's grab that one. And then when I go back to my code blocks, all I have to do is go to the left-hand side to find sound, and I can bring that over and I can start sound. So now whenever I press a space key, it'll make that sound. If that's attached to a unique musical instrument that I created, when I push that sensor or switch that I created, it'll just activate that. Another great one that I like to do is when I go into my sound again, I actually go have the students record a sound. If you go to the microphone here, you can now record something. This is great for making a project where a student's describing something, so when another person comes up and touches a button or a sensor, it will activate what they're saying. You may get an allow button here that has to allow the microphone. Make sure the students do allow that. So all I do is simply go in and click the record button. This is a demonstration of using Makey with Scratch. And then you can see I just hit stop. It even lets you trim and cut your clip a little bit and play it so you can hear it. This is a demonstration of using Makey with Scratch. So now I'm going to click save. And you can see here it is. This is a demonstration of... Now you can do some weird fun things. You can make it louder, softer, depending on what it... You can do a little bit of editing, make it faster, slower. This is a demonstration of using... Of course, the students are going to have fun with that, but let's get back to our code on the top left. And now you can see I have recording here. One little tip I want to give you is if we go back into sounds, if you're doing a project with lots of tracks, whether it's an instrument or an actual touchable interactive project, if you go into your sound, you can go in here and rename them anything you want. So then you can keep track of what it is you're going to be hitting when you hit record. So as you can see, I have 2 different options here. We have play sound until done and start sound. If I grab the play sound and hit the space button, this is a demonstration of using Makey with Scratch. It plays the whole thing, which means no other code is going to happen until that whole thing is played. If I grab the start sound, I can interrupt myself when I'm talking. This is a demonstration of using Makey. So if you're wanting to use a percussion style thing, maybe you want to use that style. But if you want to do a project and you want to make sure the interactive participant hears the whole sentence, make sure you choose play sound until done. Designing projects with music or touch points to activate voices is the best gateway into physical coding. Some of your students, though, may be a little bit more advanced in Scratch, and you can do more things with the Makey when you build a physical project. One thing you can do is you can do things like book reports where you can program the keys to activate certain things in your Scratch program. So for instance, if I'm doing The Wild Robot by Peter Brown. I can use a lot of the different keys to move things around and to interact with the screen as well as just the project in the box. So I can even send messages, send instructions, and control my Scratch program from that physical component that I've created. Let's take a look at some sample projects and resources for the Makey. You can design a controller and hook it up to Makey to operate an arcade game that you created in Scratch.
Cardboard keeper. It looks like the card.
You could design a physical lockbox where students can actually program it so it only opens on Scratch when you press in certain buttons.
Place and hold one finger here, then punch in the 4-digit code.
One of the greatest things you can do with Makey is design projects that are interactive for other people to touch. For example, how about this book in a box? One ring to rule them all. Nowadays, it's even easier to start your adventure in coding with Makey because there's so many resources on the web. First, let's go to the Makey website. If you go into your resources here and then go to the how-to guides and activities, this is a great resource that will take you through some of the things that I just took you through. You can go by grade, but it kind of shows you how to set up a Makey and start your adventure. But as you go further, it even gives you ideas on how to do things like the instruments and especially the interactive poster like I showed you in the earlier demos. Another resource that's connected to Makey is something called Instructables. Instructables can actually be found in the resources if you go over here to Instructables projects. This will actually filter all the Makey projects that have been submitted to Instructables, which is an amazing website for makers and builders to find lots of ideas. So here you can also go in and you can even filter by grades and by subjects when you go into the Instructables site. You could also just go directly to the Instructables site by typing in www.instructables.com. All you have to do is go to the search and then you're just going to type in Makey and everything tagged with the Makey. Here you'll see even more projects that have been listed for Makey in the Instructables site. Another good place for resources is the Makey YouTube channel. Here they have all the how-tos, but also always post updated events and of course cool projects for you to try with your students. And finally, don't forget to go to the Curriculum Support Services and check out the Science and Technology website, which will lead you to the Maker and Coding resources, where we'll be housing all our resources, including Makey, the tip sheets and videos, including this workshop. Enjoy using Makey, and I can't wait to see what you create.